So welcome back to our conversation about the human animal and the human predicament. And today I would like to talk about our perspective on ourselves and how unusual and even abnormal that is. And we begin with a couple of questions. How often do you see your face? Do you know what you look like? And this would seem obvious because all of us now know what we look like. We see images of ourselves all the time now. And this seems trivial, it seems familiar, and it seems absolutely normal to us. But in fact, this is historically abnormal. Because if you go into prehistory, how often would you see an image of your face or your body? Almost never. You might see a reflection of yourself in a pool of water occasionally, but that would have been an exception. You would go months, years, maybe your entire life without seeing a single image of yourself. And that's not just a curiosity, because what has happened is our consciousness is fundamentally transformed now. Cameras and mirrors, starting in the 1800s. Now, when these were first invented, they were rare, and cameras and mirrors were only the property of the aristocracy. But then in the 20th century, they became ubiquitous. And now everybody's got a camera, everybody's got mirrors in their homes, offices, everywhere. And so we constantly see images of ourselves. That fundamentally changes the way we see the world, the way we see ourselves. And it also leads, inevitably, to narcissism. And psychological research throughout the 20th century is showing a steep rise in narcissistic personalities. David Brooks of the New York Times called this the big me. And this shouldn't come as any surprise. It's all over the health and fitness industry, right? Every gym, every studio now has to have big mirrors. So you go to move your body and you have to look at yourself too. And even our concept of holistic health is narcissistic, because we talk about mind, body, spirit. We say, well, that's holistic. But it's my mind, my body, my spirit. It has nothing to say about habitat. It has nothing to say about society, culture, history, any of that. So it's really not holistic at all. Here's some more evidence of the rise in narcissism throughout the 20th century. I'll let you read this. So this has basically been an explosion of self-interest and self-focus. And listen to the way we talk. You don't have to go back very far in history, maybe one or two generations. Nobody talked this way. And you might remember George Carlin. He said, language always gives you away. And this constant talk about the self is very revealing. It's everywhere. Publications, memes, ideas, all about to maximize the self. If you would only just love yourself, that's the beginning of a lifelong romance. Native and indigenous people don't talk this way, by the way. To talk this way is historically abnormal. This is all over wellness. The entire industry is laser focused on the individual. See, laser focused on you. And here's a meme that's going around. You are entirely up to you. And I believe this is supposed to be motivational, right? Because if you would just take the bull by the horns and take care of your fitness and your life and your money and everything else, that you would be in charge of your own destiny. And it doesn't work that way. Humans are embedded in much larger forces and processes, forces of history and society and culture, and it's simply not the case that you are entirely up to you. There are other things going on. And now we've got this new word, the universe, right? And if you want to be a success in marketing and advertise, you cater to the universe. Look how we talk and the focus that we bring. Everything's personalized now. Yeah. You don't want what everyone else has. You want your own special thing. But the worst of all is the personal technology, because the promise here is that you can have your own individual personal experience that's apart from everyone else. That's abnormal and it's dangerous. Some people who advocate for this approach say, well, look, here's Abraham Maslow, the famous psychologist, talking about self-actualization at the top of the pyramid. But in fact, that's not what Abraham Maslow was advocating for. We love self-reliance, don't we? We worship these kind of people. And of course, the rise in bodybuilding. This is new too. This is historically abnormal. Native people don't do this. And these epic adventures that people take now. This is considered to be the pinnacle of fitness and adventure, is to go out and cross a major ocean or a big polar ice sheet by yourself. And we hold that in high regard. Do it by yourself and we will reward you. And of course, here's Alex Honnold with his, which is probably the most individualistic feat ever done, climbing El Cap without a rope. And we even see it in the world of spiritual practices. Yeah, here I am. Look how spiritual I've become. Yeah, it's all about me. Here's the irony to a lot of this, is that these spiritual practices of meditation and mindfulness can actually backfire and make us more narcissistic and less pro-social. And I don't think it's the practice itself. I think that it's the way we frame and present this to people. We say meditation is a means to self-improvement. In other words, the reason to do it is so you improve yourself. And that's why it tends to backfire. Here's actual research. Mindfulness decreases pro-social behavior. Wow. And of course, we glorify the individual entrepreneur who works in a coffee shop and invents some new algorithm to make millions of dollars. And now that person is financially independent and they have the fuck you money. Everybody wants fuck you money now, because then we don't have to even try to get along with one another. I will what I want. This is all over sports advertising. This idea that if your willpower is simply strong enough, you can go out and get what you want. But again, life just simply doesn't work that way. And what's really curious and disturbing about all of this is that we take this narcissistic approach, this focus on the self, and we run with it, and then we turn around and we say, I feel so disconnected. I feel so alienated and fragmented. I feel so isolated in the world. Can you help me? And then we turn to therapies that focus on the self. And we even put this into our explanations of how economics and capitalism work. We say, well, it's all down to self-interest. Yeah, and we should appeal to self-interest. People are motivated entirely by self-interest and money. Kathleen Vogt has done research where you bring people into a laboratory and you do money priming experiments. You get people to think about money, which is easy to do, right? And then you test their pro-social behaviors with questionnaires and that type of thing, and the findings are robust. Yeah, if you prime people to think about money, they're less community oriented. And that's really disturbing, because then you think about how often we are money primed throughout the day. It's really distressing. And we even glorify people like Ayn Rand, who was a big proponent of the individual orientation. Now, she grew up in Soviet Russia, so maybe that's not so surprising, but on the Republican right, she is held to be an icon. Yeah, self-interest, that's the way forward. And all of this flies in the face of everything that we know about social neuroscience and interpersonal neurobiology. Humans aren't just social animals, we are hypersocial animals, and we depend on one another for our health and our function. And to say that people can or should be isolated individuals is just simply wrong. We're embedded in the word, we're embedded in a living world. And people who study the microbiome and how influential that is on the human body, they're starting to say, you know, isolated, independent organisms are really kind of a myth. It's kind of a misunderstanding of how biology works. And so the real progress that we might make is to forget ourselves, to move away from that narcissism, away from that individual self-focus. So here's the author of Flow, and he says, the way forward is self-forgetfulness. Get away from that narcissism. Similar idea here from Sebastian Junger. He was writing about military veterans coming back from war, coming back to a society that is very individualistic. It does not have much of a community focus. And he contrasts that experience with that of native people, indigenous people, where the warriors go off to do battle and come back into a communal setting that supports their recovery from that trauma. It's a very vivid contrast. So when he says the problem is not with them, he's referring to the veterans who come back and are traumatized. No, the problem is with us and our individualistic society. So what's the focus here? Well, get over ourselves. Stop with the self-focus. Stop with the individual orientation and focus more on systems and relationships. The African social philosophy of Ubuntu. We are people through other people. You can even extend that further. We are people through habitat. We're people through society and culture. We very much need this communal orientation now to heal from this narcissism that is so widespread. And that's my presentation. So I look forward to seeing you next time.